Marcus Webb sat alone at his usual table in the central cafeteria. The massive room stretched out before him like a small city. Hundreds of tables filled the space, and thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds ate their meals. The ceiling rose high above, showing the stars outside through transparent panels. It should have felt wonderful. Instead, Marcus felt more alone than ever. He poked at his food with a fork. Earth food, shipped at great expense to the station. Most of the other species could not eat it. Their biology was too different. Just like everything else about him was different. The Concordia station orbited a neutral world far from Earth. It served as a meeting place for the Galactic Council. Scientists, diplomats, traders, and families from across known space lived here. Marcus had arrived 6 months ago as a xenobiologist. He studied alien life forms. It was his dream job, but dreams and reality rarely matched. He looked around the cafeteria. At the nearest tables, beings ate in groups. A cluster of Vryn, insect-like creatures with multiple arms, clicked and hummed to each other. Their language sounded like music. Beyond them, a family of Pelthans, tall and thin with skin like smooth stone, shared a meal from a communal bowl. Further away, a group of Kelon, beings that looked like walking plants, absorbed nutrients through their roots while discussing something that made their leaves rustle. None of them sat near Marcus. A circle of empty tables surrounded him, as if he carried an invisible disease. In a way, he supposed he did. He was human. A death worlder. A predator. Marcus understood their fear, even if it hurt. Humans came from Earth, a world the Galactic Council classified as a Class 9 death world. High gravity. Extreme weather. Aggressive wildlife. Deadly diseases. Most species in the galaxy evolved on gentler worlds. They could not survive a week on Earth without protective equipment. But humans thrived there. Humans were persistence hunters who could chase prey for hours until it collapsed from exhaustion. Humans could eat things that would poison other species. Humans healed from injuries that would kill others. And humans had forward-facing eyes, predator eyes in the galaxy. Most species were herbivores or insectivores. Predator species existed, but they were rare. The other species watched predators carefully. They made rules about them. And humans, despite only joining the Galactic Council 40 years ago, already had a reputation. Dangerous, unpredictable, emotional, violent. Marcus was none of those things. He had never hurt anyone in his life. He spent his days studying microorganisms through a microscope. He liked old books and quiet music. On Earth, his friends joked that he was the gentlest person they knew. But here, none of that mattered. The other species saw his forward-facing eyes, his omnivore teeth, his muscular build, and they saw a threat. He took a bite of his sandwich and watched the crowds. Over the months, he had learned to read the body language of different species. The Vryn's antennae positions showed their moods. The Pelthans communicated through skin color changes. The Quelans used leaf angles and scent. Right now, several nearby species showed signs of nervousness. A Vryn's antennae flattened against its head. A Pelthan's skin flickered between gray and pale blue. They had noticed something. Marcus followed their gaze across the cafeteria. His eyes found what had caught their attention. A Kashari family. The Kashari were one of the few other predator species on the station. They looked like a cross between Earth's big cats and something more alien. They stood about 4 feet tall on 2 legs. Sleek spotted fur covered their bodies in patterns of gold and black. Their faces had forward-facing eyes like Marcus, but larger and more luminous. They moved with liquid grace that made even walking look like dancing. There were 4 of them. 2 adults and 2 small ones. The cubs Marcus's mind supplied. He had read about Kashari in his studies. They were proud, territorial, and fiercely protective of their young. They had joined the Galactic Council only 20 years before humans. Other species gave them respect born from fear. The Kashari family sat at a table far from Marcus. The father was tall and powerfully built with dark spots. The mother was smaller with lighter coloring. The 2 cubs sat between their parents, eating something from small bowls, but the cubs were not focused on their food. They kept looking around the cafeteria with wide, curious eyes. And more often, those eyes landed on Marcus. The smaller cub, with fur so light it was almost cream-colored, stared at Marcus without blinking. The larger cub, darker like its father, nudged its sibling and pointed in Marcus's direction. They whispered to each other in their own language, a series of chirps and soft growls. The mother noticed and said something sharp. Both cubs looked down at their food, but within seconds they were staring at Marcus again. Marcus did not know what to do. Should he look away? That might seem weak or suspicious. Should he nod in acknowledgement? That might seem aggressive or threatening. He settled for a small, closed-mouth smile, and then returned his attention to his meal. When he glanced up again a minute later, both cubs were still watching him. Now the father had noticed too. The adult Kashari looked at Marcus with an unreadable expression. His eyes were sharp and calculating. He said something to his mate. She looked at Marcus as well, then spoke to the cubs in a firmer tone. The smaller cub made a disappointed sound but kept staring. The larger cub seemed to be arguing with the parents now, gesturing with small paws toward Marcus. Other species in the cafeteria had noticed the interaction. The ambient noise level dropped. Conversations became quieter. More beings turned to watch the Kashari family and the lone human. Marcus felt his heart beat faster. He had no idea what was happening or what it meant. Had he done something wrong? Had he accidentally made some gesture that offended them? He knew very little about Kashari culture beyond the basics. The parents seemed to win the argument. The cubs returned to their food, though with obvious reluctance. The father kept his gaze on Marcus for a few more seconds, then turned back to his own meal. The tension in the cafeteria eased slightly. Marcus released a breath he had not realized he was holding. He decided to finish his meal quickly and leave. Whatever strange interest the cubs had in him, it was better not to encourage it. The last thing he needed was to cause some kind of interspecies incident. He took another bite of his sandwich and reached for his water. When he looked up again, his hand froze halfway to his mouth. The two Kashari cubs were not at their table anymore. They were walking across the cafeteria floor, walking toward him. Their parents had their backs turned, speaking to each other intensely about something. The cubs moved with purpose, weaving between tables and other beings. Their large eyes were fixed on Marcus with unwavering focus. Marcus's mind raced. What should he do? Should he get up and leave? Should he call for their parents? Should he stay completely still? The cubs reached his table. They stopped just a few feet away, looking up at him. Up close, Marcus could see they were even smaller than he had thought. They barely came up to the height of his table. Their fur was soft and fluffy, still carrying the texture of youth. Their eyes were enormous, filled with curiosity and something else. Excitement, maybe. Or wonder. The smaller cub made a soft chirping sound. The larger one took a step closer. Then, before Marcus could react, both cubs jumped. Their powerful back legs launched them upward with ease. They landed on his table, one on each side of his tray. Small paws scattered his napkin. A water glass wobbled but did not fall. The cafeteria went completely silent. Marcus stared at the cubs. The cubs stared back at him, and somewhere behind them, he heard the scraping sound of chairs being pushed back quickly in the beginning of what might have been a roar. The silence in the cafeteria was absolute. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He could hear the soft breathing of the two cubs on his table. He could hear nothing else. Thousands of beings had stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped moving. They all watched. The two Kashari cubs sat on his table like they belonged there. The smaller one, with cream-colored fur, tilted its head to one side. Its large eyes blinked slowly. The larger cub, with darker spots, leaned forward and sniffed at Marcus's sandwich. Marcus knew he should do something, say something, but his mind had gone blank. In all his training, in all his studies of xenobiology and alien cultures, nothing had prepared him for this moment. He had read about the Kashari. They were intensely protective of their young. Approaching a Kashari cub without permission was considered a grave insult. In their culture, it suggested you might want to harm the cub, and the Kashari response to such threats was swift and violent. Wars had started over less, but he had not approached the cubs. They had approached him. Did that make a difference? He had no idea. Slowly, carefully, Marcus turned his head to look toward the cubs' family table. What he saw made his blood run cold. Both Kashari parents were standing now. The mother, with her lighter coloring, had gone completely rigid. Her fur stood on end, making her look larger. Her lips pulled back slightly, showing sharp teeth. The father was even more frightening. He had dropped into a crouch, his powerful muscles tensed. His eyes were fixed on Marcus with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. They were not running toward him yet, but they were clearly preparing to do so. and from the looks on their faces, it would not be a friendly approach. Around the cafeteria, other species were reacting too. A group of Vryn near the door began broadcasting alarm pheromones. Marcus could not smell them as strongly as the insectoid beings could, but even he caught a whiff of something sharp and acrid. Several peltons had turned completely white, a sign of extreme fear. The Quellans near the Kashari family table had wrapped their leaves tightly against their bodies and were slowly backing away. 2 station security officers, both from a species Marcus did not recognize, started moving toward his table. They wore the blue uniforms of Concordia peacekeepers. Their hands rested on the weapons at their belts. Everything was going wrong so quickly. In seconds, this would turn into violence. The parents would attack him for being near their cubs. Security would try to stop them. People would get hurt. And it would all be his fault, even though he had done nothing wrong. The smaller cub chirped again. The sound was soft and musical. It reached out one small paw and touched Marcus's hand where it rested on the table. The touch broke through Marcus's panic. He looked down at the cub. It was not showing any fear. Its eyes were bright and curious. Its body language, as far as Marcus could read it, showed excitement and friendliness. The larger cub was also relaxed, now poking at Marcus's sandwich wrapper with interest. They were not afraid of him. These young ones, who should instinctively fear a predator from another world, showed no fear at all. Why? Marcus made a decision. It might be the wrong one. It might get him killed. But doing nothing would definitely end badly. He slowly smiled. He kept his lips together, hiding his teeth. Many species found human teeth threatening. Then he carefully leaned back in his chair, making himself lower, less looming. He made his body language as non-threatening as possible. "Hello there," he said softly. His voice was barely above a whisper. He spoke in Galactic Common, the trade language most species used. "Are you explorers?" The cub's ears perked up. The larger one chirped excitedly and responded in broken Common. "Human, you are human." "I am," Marcus agreed. He kept his movement slow and deliberate. "My name is Marcus. What are your names?" The smaller cub bounced slightly with excitement, making the table shake. "I am Mira." "This is Kale." She gestured to her sibling with a paw. "Mira and Kale," Marcus repeated. "Those are beautiful names." He glanced around quickly. The parents were still frozen in place, but they had not attacked yet. They seemed confused, which was better than enraged. The security officers had slowed their approach, also uncertain. The rest of the cafeteria remained silent, watching. Marcus spotted his lunch bag next to his tray. Slowly, he reached into it and pulled out a piece of fruit. An apple from Earth, red and shiny. He had been saving it for dessert. "Are you hungry?" he asked the cubs. "Would you like to try something from my world?" Kale, the larger cub, leaned forward with intense interest. Mira chirped questioningly. Marcus took a small bite from one side of the apple, showing it was safe. Then he carefully set it on the table between the 2 cubs. "You can share it if you want." The cubs looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Kale reached out and touched the apple with one paw. He picked it up, sniffed it carefully, and took a tiny bite. His eyes went wide. He made a sound that was almost a purr. "Sweet, Mira, try." Mira took the apple from her brother and bit into it. She made the same purring sound. They began to eat the apple together, taking turns, their tails swishing happily behind them. Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. At least the cubs were happy. Now he just had to hope their parents understood he meant no harm. A movement in his peripheral vision made him look up. The Kashari parents were approaching. They moved across the cafeteria floor with deadly grace. Every being they passed shrank away from them. The father's eyes never left Marcus. The mother's gaze shifted between her cubs and the human who sat with them. Marcus stood up slowly. The cubs, busy with their apple, barely noticed. He kept his hands visible at his sides, palms forward in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. His mouth had gone dry. His heart hammered against his ribs. The parents reached his table. Up close, they were even more imposing. The father stood nearly as tall as Marcus, despite being 4 feet high because of his powerful build and the way he held himself. The mother was smaller, but somehow more frightening because of the cold calculation in her eyes. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The entire cafeteria held its breath. Marcus had studied some Kashari language in his free time. He was not fluent, but he knew basic greetings. He spoke now, hoping his pronunciation was not too terrible. Kilshara Netham, he said. Peace between hunters. It was a formal Kashari greeting, used between predator species who meant each other no harm. The father's eyes widened slightly. The mother's fur relaxed just a fraction. You speak our tongue, the father said in Galactic Common. His voice was deep and resonant. You are the human xenobiologist. Marcus Webb. Yes, Marcus confirmed. He gestured at the cubs who were now fighting playfully over the last piece of apple. Forgive me. Your cubs came to my table. I did not want to frighten them by moving suddenly. Forgive our cubs, the mother said. Her voice was softer than her mate's, but held an edge like a blade. They should not have disturbed your meal. Mira, Kale, come here now. The cubs looked up at their mother. Mira's ears drooped slightly. Kale made a sad sound, but neither of them moved from Marcus's table. But mother, Kale protested. He is interesting. He smells like pack but is not pack. He has predator eyes but gentle paws. Kale, the father said, a warning in his tone. He gave us sweet fruit, Mira added. And he speaks like us. She attempted to mimic Marcus's earlier greeting, her pronunciation adorably wrong. The mother looked at Marcus with an expression he could not read. You speak Kashari. You study other species, yet you sit alone in a room full of life. Why? It was not the question Marcus had expected. He answered honestly. Most species fear humans. They see us as dangerous, so they stay away. Are you dangerous? The father asked. It was not a challenge. It was a genuine question. Marcus thought about his answer. I could be, he said finally. All predators could be, but I choose not to be. I came to this station to learn, not to harm. The father studied him for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. You show no aggression. Yet you are a predator species like us. You do not puff yourself up to seem larger. You do not challenge me with your eyes. How is this possible? Because your cubs are not a threat to me, Marcus said simply. They are young ones. Where I come from, we protect young ones. All young ones. The mother and father exchanged a glance. Something passed between them that Marcus did not understand. Then the mother spoke. I am Naomi. This is my mate, Thessar. Our cubs have chosen to trust you. We do not understand why, but they have never chosen poorly before. She paused, then added something that made the cafeteria gasp. Will you permit us to sit with you, human Marcus? I would understand this thing better. Marcus could barely process what was happening. A Kishari family wanted to sit with him. In 6 months on the station, he had eaten every meal alone. Now the most feared predator species in the cafeteria was asking to join him. I would be honored, Marcus said. He pulled out chairs for them, a human gesture of hospitality. Thessar and Naomi sat down on either side of the table. The cubs immediately abandoned the remains of the apple and climbed onto their parents' laps. But they kept their eyes on Marcus, watching him with undiminished curiosity. Around the cafeteria, the noise slowly resumed. Beings returned to their meals and conversations, though many still cast glances at the unusual group. The security officers stopped their approach but remained nearby, watchful. Marcus sat back down. Now that the immediate crisis was over, he felt awkward. What did you talk about with an alien family that had almost attacked you minutes ago? Mira solved the problem for him. She squirmed out of her mother's lap and reached across the table toward Marcus. You have pictures, she said, pointing at his datapad. Kyle and I saw. Show us. Marcus looked at Naomi for permission. The mother studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. He picked up his datapad and tilted it so the cubs could see. He had been looking at photos from Earth during his meal, feeling homesick. The screen showed a picture of his sister's dog, a golden retriever named Sunny. This is a dog, Marcus explained. They are animals from my world. Many humans keep them as companions. Kale leaned so far forward he nearly fell off his father's lap. Thessar caught him with one paw. It looks like us, Kale said excitedly. 4 legs fur, but wrong shape. Dogs are related to wolves, Marcus continued. He swiped to the next picture, which showed a wolf pack in a snowy forest. These are wolves. They are predators, like dogs. But thousands of years ago, humans and wolves began to live together. Over time, wolves became dogs. They became our friends. Naomi's ears twitched forward with interest. Your species domesticated another predator species. And they live in your homes? Yes, Marcus said. He swiped through more pictures. Sunny playing with his niece. A cat sleeping on a windowsill. A bird perched on someone's finger. We do it with many species, not just predators. We share our lives with them. We care for them. They care for us, but why? Thessar asked. The question was not hostile, just genuinely confused. What advantage does this give you? Marcus thought about how to explain it. Companionship, love, joy. We get lonely without others around us. These animals fill that need, and we protect them in return. He swiped to a picture of a child, maybe 5 years old, hugging a large dog. Both looked happy. Human young grow up with animals. They learn to be gentle with creatures smaller than themselves. They learn responsibility by caring for another life. Mira made a sound of pure delight. The small human is hugging the dog. Like how I hug Kale. Marcus smiled. Exactly like that. He continued showing pictures. A horse running in a field. A hamster eating from someone's hand. An aquarium full of colorful fish. Each image sparked questions from the cubs and thoughtful looks from the parents. Finally, he showed a picture from a zoo. A zookeeper was bottle-feeding a baby elephant whose mother had died. The elephant's trunk wrapped around the human's arm. This young one lost its mother, Marcus explained. So humans care for it instead. They feed it, keep it warm, teach it what it needs to know. When it is old enough, they will release it back to be with other elephants. Naomi's fur rippled in a way Marcus was learning to recognize as surprise. You care for young of other species? Even when they are not your companions? Even when you gain nothing from it? Yes, Marcus said simply. Because they need help. And we can give it. Thessar and Naomi looked at each other again. That silent communication passed between them once more. When Thessar spoke, his voice was softer than before. This is not how predators behave. Predators compete. They fight. They take resources for themselves and their own young. They do not waste energy on others. Humans are different, Marcus said. We survived on our world by working together. Not just with other humans, but with other species. We made alliances. We formed packs. Not just family packs, but chosen packs. Chosen packs. Naomi repeated the words slowly as if tasting them. You choose who is part of your pack? Even across species? Yes, Marcus confirmed. On Earth, we have a saying. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. We extend that to any being that needs care or protection. Kale had been wiggling with barely contained excitement. Now he burst out, Can I be in your pack? Kyle! Thessar's voice was sharp. That is not appropriate, but Marcus laughed. It was the first time he had laughed on the station, and it felt good. I would be happy to have you in my pack, Kale. You too, Mira, if your parents allow it. Mira began purring loudly. She wiggled so much that Naomi had to hold her firmly to keep her from climbing back onto the table. We can be pack with a human. We can be pack. Thessar looked overwhelmed. Naomi just stared at Marcus like he was a puzzle she could not solve. A new voice interrupted the moment. Excuse me. Marcus looked up to see a Vryn standing next to their table. This one wore the white coat of a scientist. Her antennae curved forward in a gesture Marcus had learned meant curiosity and friendliness. Forgive the intrusion, the Vryn said. Her voice came from a translator device on her collar. Her own speech sounded like musical clicking. I am Dr. Yilvin. I'm a xenosociologist. I study how different species interact. Hello, Doctor, Marcus said. I am Marcus Webb. I know who you are, Dr. Yilvin said. I have been studying humans since you arrived on this station. This interaction between you and the Kashari family is fascinating. May I observe? Thessar's fur rippled with annoyance, but Naomi spoke before her mate could refuse. You may observe. But explain what you see to the others here. They watch with fear. Let them understand instead. Dr. Yilvin's antennae bobbed in what might have been agreement. She pulled up a chair and sat down. Then she raised her voice slightly, speaking to the cafeteria at large. For those watching, she announced in Galactic Common, let me explain what you are seeing. Humans evolved as what we call cooperative breeders. Most species care only for their own offspring. Humans care for all young ones. It is built into their biology. Several nearby beings stopped eating to listen. Dr. Yilvin continued, warming to her subject. Humans have an instinctive response to features we call neotenic triggers. Large eyes, small bodies, soft sounds, high-pitched voices. These features signal youth and vulnerability. When humans see these features, their brains release chemicals that make them want to protect and nurture. This happens even with young of other species. She gestured to the cubs who were now sharing Marcus's datapad between them. swiping through pictures with their paws. Notice how the Kashari cubs triggered this response in human Marcus. He did not see potential threats. He saw young ones who needed gentleness. A Pelthan at a nearby table spoke up, its voice translating from color changes through its device. But humans are predators. Predators should see prey, not children. That is the beautiful complexity of humans, Dr. Yulvin responded. Yes, they are apex predators. Yes, they evolved to hunt, but they also evolved in cooperative groups. They needed all group members to survive, including the young. So they developed powerful nurturing instincts alongside their hunting instincts. They learned to choose which instinct to follow, Naomi said quietly. She was watching Marcus, who was now teaching the cubs a simple human hand game. They can be dangerous, but they choose not to be. Exactly, Dr. Yulvin said. Humans call it pack bonding. They form emotional attachments across species barriers. They adopt orphaned animals. They rescue injured creatures. They even risk their lives to save beings that are not part of their family or even their species. Thessar had been silent for a while, watching his cubs interact with Marcus. Now he spoke, his deep voice thoughtful. On our world, we protect only our own cubs. To care for others young would mean less food for our own. It would be weakness. But humans do not see it as weakness, Dr. Yulvin said. They see it as strength. The strength to choose compassion when they have the power to choose otherwise. Marcus was only half listening to the conversation. Most of his attention was on Mira and Kale. Mira had grown tired and was starting to yawn. Without thinking, Marcus reached out and gently scratched behind her ears, the way he would pet a cat on Earth. Mira's eyes went half closed. She made a deep, rumbling purr and leaned into his touch. Then, to everyone's shock, she climbed fully into Marcus's lap, curled up in a ball and closed her eyes. The cafeteria went silent again. The Tsar started to rise, alarm on his face. But Naomi put a paw on his arm, stopping him. Her eyes were fixed on her daughter with an expression of wonder. She is asleep, Naomi whispered, on a stranger, on a predator from another world, and she feels safe enough to sleep. Kale, not wanting to be left out, climbed into Marcus's lap as well and settled next to his sister. Within seconds, he too was purring softly, drifting toward sleep. Marcus sat very still, afraid to move and disturb them. Two Kashari cubs trusting him completely, sleeping on him like he was their parent. Tears pricked at his eyes. For the first time since arriving at the station, he did not feel alone. For almost an hour, Marcus sat with two sleeping Kashari cubs in his lap while their parents watched. Other beings in the cafeteria resumed their meals, but the atmosphere had changed. Where before Marcus had sat in a bubble of isolation, now beings kept glancing over with expressions he was learning to read as curiosity, rather than fear. Dr. Yulvin had stayed at the table, taking notes on her own datapad. Occasionally she asked Marcus questions about human child-rearing practices, human emotional bonds, human social structures. He answered as best he could while trying not to move too much and wake the cubs. Naomi and Thessar had relaxed considerably. Thessar no longer looked ready to attack at any moment. Naomi had started asking her own questions, wanting to understand this strange human behavior. On your world, Naomi asked, do all humans feel this way toward young ones? Most do, Marcus said quietly. Some more than others. But yes, it is common. We see something small and helpless and we want to protect it, even if it is not human. But this could be a weakness, Thessar pointed out. What if something used your caring nature against you? What if a predator disguised itself as something helpless to get close? That happens sometimes, Marcus admitted. On Earth, there are stories of such things. But we decided long ago that the risk is worth it. Better to help 100 beings that might betray you than to refuse help to one that truly needs it. Thessar's tail twitched. A strange philosophy. Perhaps, Marcus agreed. But it is how we survived. How we built our civilization, by trusting and being trusted in return. Mira stirred in his lap and made a sleepy sound. Marcus gently adjusted his hold on her, supporting her small body. She settled back into sleep with a contented purr. The moment was peaceful. Perfect even. Marcus let himself enjoy it, knowing it could not last. It did not. Heavy footsteps approached the table. Marcus looked up to see a being he recognized and immediately worried about. Commander Vorath, the station's security chief. Vorath belonged to a species called the Corvin. They were tall and broad with thick gray skin that looked like armor. Their faces were flat and expressionless. They had evolved on a world where hierarchy and order meant survival. Vorath ran station security with rigid efficiency and had no patience for what he called protocol deviations. The commander stopped at their table. His small eyes swept over the scene, noting the sleeping cubs in Marcus's lap, the Kashari parent sitting calmly, Dr. Yilvin taking notes. "Human web," Vorath said. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You will explain this situation." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Sir, the cubs approached me. I did nothing to encourage them. I was simply eating my meal when they climbed onto my table. And you did not immediately alert security?" "It happened very fast, sir. And I did not want to startle the cubs or their parents." Vorath turned his attention to Thessar and Naomi. "Your cubs approached a predator class being from an unproven species. This violates station safety protocols regarding the protection of vulnerable juveniles." Thessar's fur began to bristle. "Are you suggesting we do not protect our own cubs adequately?" "I am stating facts," Vorath replied, his tone unchanged. "Humans have been on this station for only 6 months. We do not have sufficient data on their behavior around other species young. Protocol requires that first contacts between humans and juveniles of other species be supervised." "My cubs were never in danger," Naomi said. Her voice had gone cold and sharp. "Human Marcus showed only gentleness." "You could not have known that in advance," Vorath countered. "What if he had reacted differently? What if he had seen your cubs as threats or as prey?" Dr. Yilvin spoke up. "Commander, with respect, my research into human behavior suggests that scenario was highly unlikely. Humans have strong protective instincts toward young beings of all species." "Research is not certainty," Vorath said. "I must file an incident report." "This will require an inquiry." "An inquiry?" Marcus felt panic rising. But nothing bad happened. "The cubs are fine. Everyone is fine. Protocol must be followed," Vorath stated. "You will appear before a panel tomorrow to explain your actions. The Kashari family will also be questioned." Thessar stood up, his powerful frame radiating anger. "You dare to question us about our own cubs?" "I dare to enforce the safety regulations that protect all beings on this station," Vorath replied calmly. "Including your cubs." The tension at the table had woken Mira. She blinked her large eyes and looked up at the tall Corvin looming over them. Then she looked at Marcus's face and must have seen his worry because she made a questioning chirp. "It's okay, little one," Marcus murmured, even though he was not sure it was okay at all. Kale woke too, disturbed by his sister's movement and the sharp voices around them. Both cubs looked confused and a bit frightened by the sudden change in atmosphere. Naomi stood and held out her arms. "Come, my young ones. We are leaving." The cubs climbed reluctantly from Marcus's lap into their mother's arms. Mira looked back at Marcus with sad eyes. "Will we see you again?" "I hope so," Marcus said, trying to smile despite his worry. Thessar was still staring at Vorath with barely contained anger. But Naomi touched his arm, and after a moment he turned to Marcus instead. "You showed my cubs kindness when you could have shown them nothing," Thessar said formally. "You protected them when you could have used them. For this you have my gratitude and my respect." He placed a paw over his heart in a Kashari gesture of honor. Then he and his family left the cafeteria, the cubs looking back over their parents' shoulders until they were out of sight. Marcus felt their absence like a physical ache. He had only known the cubs for an hour, but already he cared about them. Already they had filled some empty space inside him. "Human web," Vorath said, drawing his attention back. "Report to conference room 7 tomorrow at 10th bell. Do not be late." Then the commander left as well. Marcus put his head in his hands. "I cannot believe this is happening." "Do not despair," Dr. Yilvin said. Her antennae drooped sympathetically. "I will speak at your inquiry. I will explain the human pack-bonding instinct. Others saw what happened here. They will speak too." "But what if the panel decides I am dangerous?" Marcus asked. "What if they restrict my access to public areas? What if they send me back to Earth?" The thought of leaving now, just when he had made his first real connection on the station, was unbearable. "Trust in truth," Dr. Yilvin said. "You did nothing wrong. The panel will see that," but Marcus was not so sure. He had learned that different species had very different ideas about right and wrong. What seemed natural to him might seem threatening to others. He spent the rest of the day preparing for the inquiry. He reviewed everything he knew about Kashari culture. He wrote notes on human child-rearing practices. He tried to find regulations about interspecies interactions, but the rules were vague and contradictory. That night, he barely slept. When he did sleep, he dreamed of Mira and Kale, of their trusting eyes and soft purrs. He dreamed of losing the first real friendship he had made in 6 months. The next morning, Marcus dressed carefully in his formal uniform. He arrived at conference room 7 early and sat outside, waiting. His hands shook slightly. He clasped them together to make them still. Other beings passed by, heading to their own business. Some glanced at him curiously. A few nodded in greeting, which was new. Word of yesterday's events had apparently spread. At precisely 10th bell, the door opened. A Pelthan administrator gestured for him to enter. The room was large and formal. A curved table sat at one end, with 5 beings seated behind it. Marcus recognized only one, Commander Vorath, looking as expressionless as ever. The others were species he had seen around the station but never spoken to. In the center seat sat a being of exceptional age. Her species was Kelon, plant-like with bark-textured skin and leaves that changed color with her moods. Her leaves were currently a neutral green-brown. Human Marcus Webb, she said in a voice like rustling leaves. I am Elder Mishara, Chief Mediator for the Concordia Council. You have been called to explain yesterday's incident involving 2 Kashari juveniles. Marcus stood before them, feeling very alone. Yes, Elder. The incident has caused considerable discussion, Mishara continued. Many beings have contacted us with their observations and opinions. Before we hear testimony from others, we would hear from you. Tell us in your own words what happened. Marcus took a breath and began to speak. He described his meal, the cubs' curiosity, their approach, his decision to remain calm and non-threatening, the parents' arrival, the conversation that followed. As he spoke, he became more confident. He had done nothing wrong. He had acted with kindness and respect. Surely they would see that. You gave the cubs food from your world, one of the panel members said. This one was a Vryn with blue-tinted carapace. How did you know it would not poison them? I didn't give them my meal, Marcus explained. I gave them a fruit. A simple fruit. I tested it first by eating some myself to show it was safe, and I gave them only a small piece. Still, the Vryn said, you took a risk with another species young. A small risk for a large benefit, Marcus countered. They were curious. I wanted to show them friendship. Friendship? Commander Vorath spoke for the first time. You had never met these cubs before. How could you feel friendship? Marcus looked at him steadily. Commander, on my world, friendship does not require prior acquaintance. It requires only openness and kindness. The panel members looked at each other. Elder Mishara's leaves shifted through several colors that Marcus could not interpret. Then she spoke again. We will now hear from other witnesses. Dr. Yilvin, please come forward. The Vryn xenosociologist entered from a side door. She approached the panel and began to speak, her translator turning her musical clicks into Galactic Common. I have studied human behavior extensively, Dr. Yilvin said. What human Marcus did yesterday was not unusual for his species. It was typical. Humans have evolved strong nurturing instincts that extend across species boundaries. They form what they call pack bonds with beings who are not their biological relatives. She pulled up images on a display screen. Pictures of humans with animals. Children playing with pets. People rescuing injured wildlife. A firefighter carrying a cat from a burning building. Humans do not see other species as separate from themselves, Dr. Yilvin continued. They see all beings as potential pack members. This extends especially to young ones. Human biology drives them to protect juveniles, even of species very different from their own. But is this not a weakness? The blue Vryn on the panel asked. Could this instinct not be exploited? It could, Dr. Yilvin admitted. But humans accept that risk. They believe the benefit of cross-species cooperation outweighs the danger of occasional betrayal. And their history proves them right. Humans have successfully domesticated dozens of species. They have formed alliances with creatures that should be their enemies. Their civilization is built on these unlikely partnerships. She turned to look at Marcus. What you saw yesterday was not human Marcus breaking protocol. It was human Marcus following the deepest protocols of his species. To protect, to nurture, to welcome others into his pack. Next came testimony from several beings who had been in the cafeteria. A Pelthan merchant described how carefully Marcus had moved, how gentle his voice had been. A Quellon student talked about the way the Cubs had responded to him with trust instead of fear. Even one of the security officers admitted that Marcus had handled the situation better than many trained professionals would have. Then Thessar and Naomi entered the room, their cubs walking between them. Marcus felt his heart lift at seeing them again. Mira spotted him and chirped happily, but Naomi kept her daughter close. Elder Mishara addressed the Kashari parents. "You are the ones most affected by this incident. Your cubs approached a being from a species unknown to them. How do you view human Marcus's actions?" Thessar stepped forward. His voice was formal and serious. "Before yesterday, I believed all predator species were like mine, territorial, aggressive, focused only on their own bloodline. Human Marcus showed me I was wrong." He gestured to his cubs. "My young ones have an instinct for danger. They avoid beings who wish them harm. They approached human Marcus not in foolishness but in wisdom. They sensed in him something we Kashari do not have. The ability to care for young that are not his own." Naomi spoke next. "I watched him with our cubs. He fed them. He entertained them. He held them while they slept. Any parent knows these actions. These are the actions of a caregiver, not a threat. My daughter fell asleep on him. No young one sleeps on a being they fear." She paused, then added something that made several panel members lean forward in surprise. "If human Marcus were Kashari, we would ask him to be pack brother to our cubs, to help raise them, to teach them. Since he is not Kashari, we simply ask that he be allowed to continue his friendship with them. They have chosen him. We honor that choice." Commander Vorath stood up. "With respect, the question is not whether human Marcus acted with good intentions. The question is whether we can trust that all humans will act this way. He is one individual. What about others of his species?" "A fair question," Elder Mishara said. "Human Marcus, are all humans like you?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "No, Elder. Humans are individuals. We have different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses, but the instinct to protect young ones is nearly universal among us. You would be hard-pressed to find a human who would harm a child deliberately, any child of any species. How can you be certain?" Vorath challenged. "Because on Earth, those who harm children are considered the worst of criminals," Marcus replied. "They are outcasts. Our society punishes them severely because they violate our most sacred instinct, to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He looked at each panel member in turn. "I understand your caution. You do not know humans well yet. But I can tell you this. If you want to judge humanity, judge us by how we treat the most vulnerable among us. Not just our own children, but all children, all beings who need help. That is where you will see our true nature." Elder Mishara's leaves had turned a warm gold. "You speak with passion, human Marcus. This inquiry has been enlightening. We will now deliberate." The panel members conferred in low voices. Marcus could not hear what they said. The wait felt eternal. Beside him, Mira wiggled with impatience. Kale kept looking between Marcus and his parents with anxious eyes. Finally, Elder Mishara raised her hand for silence. "We have reached a decision. Human Marcus Webb, this panel finds that you violated no protocols. You responded to an unusual situation with admirable restraint and kindness. Furthermore, your actions have provided valuable insight into human behavior." Marcus felt relief flood through him, but Elder Mishara was not finished. "However, this incident has revealed a gap in our understanding. We have protocols for many situations, but not for species with such strong cross-species bonding instincts. Dr. Yilvan, we are authorizing a formal study. You will research human pack bonding behavior and its implications for station life. Human Marcus, we ask that you cooperate with this study." "Of course, Elder," Marcus said. "Furthermore," Mishara continued, "we encourage other species to interact more with the humans on this station. Fear comes from ignorance. Understanding comes from experience. What happened yesterday should happen more often. Not incidents, but connections. Friendships across species lines." She looked directly at Marcus and her leaves shimmered with warm colors. "You have shown us something important, human Marcus. You have shown us that predators can choose mercy, that strength can be gentle, that the most dangerous beings can also be the most caring. This is a lesson we all needed to learn." The inquiry was over. The panel members stood and left through the side door. Marcus remained standing, still processing what had happened. He had not been punished. He had not been restricted. Instead, he had been validated. Mira broke free from her mother and ran to Marcus. She wrapped her small arms around his leg and purred loudly. Kale followed, climbing up Marcus like he was a tree until he perched on Marcus's shoulder. Thessar and Naomi approached more slowly. Thessar extended his paw in the human gesture of handshaking that Marcus had taught them yesterday. "Thank you, Pack Brother," Thessar said, "for showing gentleness to our cubs, for speaking truth to power, for being a bridge between our kinds." Marcus shook his paw carefully. "Thank you for trusting me with them. They are remarkable young ones." "They are yours too now," Naomi said. "In our culture, when cubs choose an adult outside their family, that adult becomes packkin. You are part of our family if you wish to be." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes again. "I would be honored." Over the next days and weeks, everything changed. Word of the inquiry spread throughout the station. The story of the human who befriended Kashari cubs became famous. Beings who had avoided Marcus before now approached him with questions and curiosity. Dr. Yilvan's study became one of the most popular research projects on the station. She interviewed Marcus extensively. She observed him interacting with various species. She published preliminary findings that fascinated the scientific community. But the biggest change was in the cafeteria. Marcus no longer ate alone. Thessar and Naomi joined him most days, bringing their cubs. Other beings began sitting nearby, then at the same table. A Pelthan family introduced Marcus to their offspring. A Quellan asked him about earth plants. Even some of the Vryn started including him in their conversations. The cubs especially changed everything. Mira and Kale were fascinated by humans and by Marcus in particular. They visited him in his laboratory. They brought him pictures they had drawn. They asked endless questions about Earth and human culture, and through them other young ones lost their fear. One day, about a month after the inquiry, Marcus was eating lunch with his usual group when a small Pelthan child approached. The child was shy, staying several steps away. But it held out a small stone, polished smooth. "My parents said you like gifts from young ones," the child said in halting common. "This is from my world, for you." Marcus accepted the stone carefully. "Thank you. It is beautiful. What is your name?" "I am Peller," the child said. "Hello, Peller. Would you like to sit with us?" The child looked back at its parent, who nodded encouragingly. Peller climbed onto the bench next to Marcus, sitting between him and Mira, who immediately began chattering to the newcomer in a mix of Kashari and Common. More children came over the following weeks. A Vryn youngling asked Marcus about earth insects. A Quellan seedling wanted to know about human gardens. Even the young of